Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Duncan. I am the CEO of the Fund Coach, and I'm a fundraising coach that empowers nonprofit leaders with the skill and confidence to secure large gifts from wealthy donors. I've been in the nonprofit space since 1987. I run the gamut of organizations that I've worked for. I've worked for organizations serving um, special needs adults. I've worked in the camp and conference ministry. I worked in higher education where I ran a $60 million capital campaign. I worked in public media where I ran a $5 million capital campaign. And I also worked in healthcare running a $3 million capital campaign. And then I've also worked in the K through 12 charter space. All of my years in the nonprofit space have been in sort of leadership roles. Early in my career has been more boots on the ground, direct care services, and then moving into, administration and primarily in fundraising. So that's what I do. This workshop today is I called "Ask with Confidence," and how to secure significant gifts from wealthy individuals. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started. Okay, so here's what you can expect on today's session. We're going to talk about your money story. We're going to talk about the self imposed barriers that can prevent us from asking for money. We're going to talk about making that mindset shift that you need to make in order to be successful at this. Um, why wealthy people give big, why relationship fundraising is king, and then the ask itself. Now, during the ask, I'm going to be asking for a volunteer to do a role play with me, and that volunteer, the instructions, whoever I call on, here's what you need to be thinking about. I want you to not be yourself, meaning in terms of your own situation financially. I want you to think of yourself as the wealthiest person on the planet. I want you to get in that mindset of being the wealthiest person on the planet. Okay. And throughout the role play, I want you to be in that space. Okay. All right. So let's talk about your money story. The money stories that we all have come from our childhood. Sometimes it's because of the things that we hear or witness as children. Um, Sometimes they have to do with there being a lack of funds. There's shame associated with our own money story, jealousy, never enough. We tend to maybe get angry about where we are, fear, resentment, and fear of missing out. These are sort of some words that are associated with what could be our own money story, right? And I'm talking about a lifetime worth of association. Okay. Now, your organization's money story is important too. That mindset, that money mindset. So it's one thing for you personally to have that money story, but what's your organization's money story? Um, First of all, the word nonprofit. Let's think about that for a minute. That word, in and of itself, has a connotation that may not feel great. When you hear nonprofit, there are other words that pop into mind. Charity is one of those words. Um, when we think about supporting nonprofits, maybe we're trying to get a handout from someone. We'll take what we can get, right? Is this the mindset that we have as organizations when it comes to fundraising? We'll take what we can get. Every little bit counts. Making ends meet. These are words and phrases that we utter perhaps in our daily work. Donor fatigue. Um, you know, to have the word fatigue associated with donor it's a common phrase that we use, but we have to think about how that phrase sort of impacts our work, because donor fatigue has a negative connotation. It means that our donors are tired of us, or tired of us asking. And that may not be the case. Your donors may very well think very highly of you and don't have a problem with you soliciting them on a regular basis, right? But these are the words that we use. And wearing many hats. How many of us working for small to mid-sized nonprofits are wearing so many hats? You're running the organization, you're handling program, you're the front-facing person, and you're also the behind-the-scenes person, depending on what day it is and what hat you're wearing. Okay, so these are phrases, these are things that I have heard over my career. I hear it from my own clients, and this whole idea of mindset is something that we need to tackle first and head on. So often when we think about asking for money, we just want to know how to do it, or we just want to ask for it and get the dollars in the door. There's more to it than that. This is about making sure that you, as an individual, and your organization have the right mindset. Okay, so I want to introduce you to two. Um, they're financial psychologists, both of them, Kathleen and Brad. Um, these are two individuals that understand what it means to deal with folks, and in terms of their own money story, and how it impacts not only their lives. I use it here to talk about how it impacts fundraising. Okay. So there's a video here that I'm going to play, and they're going to talk a little bit about their money story, and also the impact that it's had on them. And this is just an example. So here you go.
Kathleen and Brad were kind enough to share their own stories growing up.
My mother gave me some money to go buy milk. It was the good old days when you could go buy milk when you were a kid unsupervised. And so I ran off with my friend. We got the milk, and I can remember there was a nickel change. And when I got home, I gave my mother the milk, but I did not give her the nickel. And of course I got in trouble. What I walked away with was my love of money is shameful, that there's something wrong with my desire to hang on to this nickel that is not okay. And so as an adult, what is interesting is I've always been good at managing the money, making money, but my love of money, my desire as an entrepreneur to be profitable, actually I had to work through some of that shame and that discomfort, I think because I was sent the message that it's not okay, Kathleen, that you love money so much that you want to keep it.
So I think I associated not having money with pain and anxiety and family strife. My mom likes to say we were middle class except lower. And I'm like, yeah, Mom, they got words for that. In my understanding my own financial psychology, I went home and I interviewed my mother. I didn't understand why she was so afraid to invest. And then she told me this story about my grandfather, which all of a sudden made my crazy relationship with money make perfect sense. My grandfather went to the bank one day and his money was gone. It was the Great Depression. The banks closed. He never put a dollar in the bank the rest of his life. He died in his 90s, keeping his money in a lockbox. So understanding that family pattern, it really gave me compassion for my grandfather and my mother, because of course my mom's anxious about money. She's too anxious to invest. She was raised by a guy who wouldn't even put money in the bank. So we have these conclusions we walk away with around money. Rich people are greedy, or money corrupts, or you can never have enough money, or there's virtue in having less money. These are all beliefs that we've studied that get inherited and emerge from our experiences around money.
So let that sit for a little while. I thought those were two very good examples of how our money stories are shaped, and our money stories do impact us as individuals, thus impacting our ability to actually talk about money when it comes to our nonprofit organizations. So I want to talk about self-imposed barriers that come up as a result of this, some of which you heard in their statements. But anticipatory anxiety is an issue that I often deal with many of my clients, and that is just this worry about the future and fear that bad things might happen, or that you might become unable to successfully accomplish what you set out to do. In this case, I'm talking about anticipatory anxiety as it relates to asking for money, right, from wealthy individuals, right? So, and this quote comes from Overcoming Anticipatory Anxiety by Sally Winston and Martin Seif. Okay, so why does this happen, to us? Sort of the fear of the unknown, right? When we're leaning in. Um, there's some past negative experiences around money, whether it's asking for money or going back to your childhood, or even early adulthood. There's this pressure to perform, this high expectations from yourself and or others. And so, how do we take the edge off, right? First of all, we got to accept it, right? We have to accept that this is where we are. We can't hide it. We can't, walk away from it. It is what it is, right? We have to accept it. But then, and it's also normal to feel anxious around this whole idea of asking for money. So don't judge yourself. Go easy on yourself when it comes to this. Focus on the present moment, and breathe deeply, right? These are some things that you can do to manage that. Uh, and trying to walk away from it and ignore it will only exacerbate the issue. So visualize success, picture hearing yes when you ask, and that will put you in that proper mindset, and prepare like a pro, right? And we'll get to that a little bit later. We'll talk about imposter syndrome, right? This is the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills, right? So when we talk about imposter syndrome, right, we're talking about, we think about that ourselves, but we don't often think about imposter syndrome on behalf of our organizations, right? Sometimes our organizations, we feel like they aren't, worthy of support. They aren't good enough, whatever that may be, right? They're not the Johns Hopkins and the larger nonprofit organizations, of the world, but they are worthy, right? And so, but we have this imposter syndrome, which underscores syndrome, right? It's not real, right? It's something we create in ourselves, and we do that, and we're avoiding the challenges as a result. So here are the signs of that. There's self-doubt, fear of failure, avoiding challenges, of course, and imposter syndrome. What does why does it happen? We have this innate need to be perfect. So we have this perfectionism. We set these unrealistically high standards. We compare ourselves to other organizations. We're always measuring against someone else, and we don't need to do that. Every organization is unique, and serves the people uniquely that you serve. Um, there's this attribution bias. So believing success is due to luck, not your ability. Like, oh, I got lucky, right? There's really not a whole lot that we do that's based on luck. It's based on hard work, and it is based on our belief to be able to impact the lives of the people that we serve. So when we try to kick imposter syndrome to the curb, we have to reframe our thinking. We have to challenge the negative self talk that comes with this. We need to focus on our accomplishments. What have we done well, right? As opposed to focusing on our failures, and embrace the power of good enough, right? We are good enough. Don't worry about the organization over there that's doing something different from what you're doing. What you're doing is good enough. That whole grass is greener thing does come into play when it comes to nonprofits. And also talk to someone, right? Whether you're talking to a spouse, a friend, or a professional, sort of about this whole idea of imposter syndrome. So how do we make this mindset shift, right? We go from we have a fixed mindset, right, which is the belief that a person's ability and intelligence are largely static traits that cannot significantly change. They can't significantly be changed, right? That's that fixed mindset. A lot of us are in that. We're just locked in. This is what I believe, and that's the end of it, right? Those with a fixed mindset tend to avoid challenges, to maintain the perspective of their existing ability, and avoid failure at all costs. Okay. And so sometimes we walk around with this fixed mindset and we just believe what we believe, and that's it. Okay. So first thing we have to do is we've got to face our own money story. We have to be aware of it, right? So going back in your mind, what shaped your monies? What's your first money memory? Is it having to do with allowance? Does it have to do with, like Kathleen said in the video, you being sent to the store and you're handling money for your parents, and even though that was a nickel that she was supposed to return, she kept it, and then the reaction from her parents or her mom as a result of that played into her own money story. We've got to be aware of it. We've got to be aware of what that is. Okay. Once we're aware, we've got to process it. So we have to connect to the emotion associated with that, right? I'm not telling you to hold on to it. I'm telling you to be aware of it, process it, connect with it, and then you've got to, recognize that it's not your money truth, right? It is not your money truth. These are all memories and things that shaped how you relate to money, but that doesn't have to be true because you can change that. Okay. So once you recognize that, become aware of it, process it, recognize that it's not your money truth, and then release it and move on. Let it go. Okay. And now we have to talk about adopting an abundance mindset. Think of money as a form of appreciation. There is enough for every organization. And that is the truth, especially in the context of today's climate. I know that there's a whole lot of anxiety right now across the nonprofit space uh, because of what's happening in our world, in our country today, right? Completely understand that. But there's also an opportunity to pivot. And this is what I've been talking with folks about over the last couple of months, that there is an opportunity to pivot, right? Those sources of revenue that are being threatened right now are not the only sources of revenue for your organization. There's enough for every organization. And I'm talking about resources from all sorts of places, but primarily from individuals. Okay. Um, Donors experience joy when they give. You're actually helping them experience that joy when you connect with them and ultimately ask them to give. Okay. So keep the people that you serve first. Who are the people that you're serving in your organization? Why did you create your organization if you were the founder? Why did you go to work for your organization if you were hired by your organization to lead it? Right? It was probably because of the work that they're doing, right, for the people that are being served. They've got to be first. That's why you do what you do. So stay focused on the why. You are the conduit between the generous donors and the people that you serve. So you probably, without even knowing it, have people in your universe that have the capacity to give in a significant way, right? You just have to be able to build those relationships and ask, right? You're the connection between the people that you serve and those folks who have capacity to make a huge difference, right? Your confidence when asking can change lives. And that's what we're focusing on today. So, abundance mindset equals potential without limits. Limiting beliefs are self-imposed. Embrace challenges when they come. Don't run away from them. Embrace them. Keep the people that you serve top of mind, and surround yourself with support, whether that's staff or loved ones, or whomever. Right? And effort, right? Effort, not perfection, is the path to mastery. One of the things I say about perfection is the enemy of success, right? When we strive to be perfect, we're actually hindering progress. It becomes the enemy of success. So effort, not perfection, is the path to mastery. Now, I want to talk about my top 5 reasons why people who have capacity give and why they give big. Okay, so number 5, legacy and reputation. Right? Legacy and reputation of the organization. So if your organization has a legacy and reputation for doing good work, serving the people that you serve, right? That is a reason why people give. Now, of course, there are these a lot of organizations that have a legacy and reputation that is national, international, right? A lot of the Ivy League colleges and universities, hospital systems, larger organizations like the American Cancer Society and American Heart Association. These are all organizations that have a legacy and reputation. They've been around for a while, and they've made an impact. Number four is the tax deduction, right? So a lot of folks, especially organizations that are just getting started, they get that 501c3 status because they believe that the tax deduction is what drives people to give. And in all actuality, it's not a driver. Yeah, it's number four, but it's not a driver. And to prove that, right? If you go back to 2017, when the tax laws changed, which meant that people could not itemize and deduct what they could before then, right? Because of the minimum deduction, right, or the standard deduction. So the standard deduction for an individual versus a couple, it goes up a little here. But let's just say, for sake of argument, standard deduction for an individual is 13,000, and the standard deduction for a couple is something like 29,000. So if you as a donor have given more than that, then you can itemize whether individual or couple. But if you haven't given more than that, so in other words, you've given maybe $10,000 as a couple, well, you really can't itemize that gift. That's the only change, right? But did that have an impact on fundraising? And the answer is absolutely not, right? There was this fear that was pervasive among nonprofit organizations back in 2017, thinking that, oh my gosh, this is going to be the end of it for us. People aren't going to give because they can't deduct. That's not a driver. That's not a driver, and you're going to find out why it isn't in these next three reasons. Number three, personal connection to the organization. Now, that could be because they use the services that you provide. They're an alum that used to use these services you provide, and you may have had a profound impact on their lives or lives of family members. There's some personal connection there, right? That's definitely a stronger driver than the tax deduction. Number two, and I talked about this earlier, it feels good, right? There's joy in giving. There are studies out there that prove that people actually derive joy from giving. Okay. Number one, and I usually ask if anybody can guess what number one is. If you can, type it in the chat. If you can guess what the number one reason is why people give big. Anybody want to give that a shot? Okay, let's see. Okay, because they're generous, their faith instructs them to. Okay, those are good responses. Good responses. But you're going to be shocked when I tell you what the real reason is why people give and give big. They were asked. They were asked. Right? At the end of the day, because somebody looked them in the eye and asked them for that gift. That is what drives people to give and give big. Let's take a look at, I'll give you one example. If you recall, a little over a year ago, Spelman College in HBCU had been given a $100 million gift in January of 2024. If you saw the way it rolled out on the news, right, it made it seem like this money just appeared. Like, oh my goodness, Spelman College got a $100 million gift. That is wonderful. It was even on the news itself. It was a surprise to the students. You saw the president announcing it to the students and the cheering and all of that. But when you take a look under the hood of that gift, here's what you're going to find. The person who made the gift, she and her husband, had made, first of all, she has a 28-year relationship with the institution, serving on various boards and committees. She and her husband made previous gifts of $2 million and $30 million. This $100 million gift coincidentally happened to come in January of 2024, the beginning of the 100-year anniversary of Spelman College. That is not a coincidence, right? She and her husband had been in conversations with the institution. They asked them to make this transformational gift and to be able to announce it at the beginning of their anniversary year. They were asked. They were asked. They didn't just write the check because they woke up one morning and felt like they should do that. In fact, that rarely happens with large gifts, right? It's because a relationship was in place between the donors and the institution. And ultimately, a large gift came to the organization, which also emboldened others when they were asked to be able to give big as well. Okay. So, my point here is that people actually drive philanthropy. Now, this chart that you're looking at is from 2023. This is from Giving USA. 2024's data will not be ready until June. So, this is the latest and greatest information about giving in the USA. When you look at this, you will see that in 2023, $557 billion was given to U.S. charities. Okay. When you break that down, over 70% came from individuals, not foundations, not corporations, actual people. And to see that breakdown, if you look at these two numbers, you'll see that the straight giving from individuals about 67% and another 8% from bequests, right? Look at what foundations gave and look at what corporations gave. A fraction of the overall giving in this country. Yet, we find ourselves more concerned about writing grants, getting in front of foundations, federal funds, right, which right now are the topic of conversation. And when you look at the representation of those funds, you will see that it is a fraction of the philanthropy that happens in this country. People drive philanthropy. There's no way around it. It doesn't matter what year it is. It doesn't matter how strong or weak the economy is. These numbers haven't changed very much in the last few decades. Okay. So let's talk about relationship fundraising. I call it relationship fundraising. The outcome of relationship fundraising is a major gift. Many organizations talk about major gifts. That's the outcome. I talk about what you have to do to get it. Okay. So relationship fundraising is king. It is the most effective way to raise money, hands down. Better than grant writing, better than doing a gala or an event, better than trying to secure federal funding. Yes, you can get big federal grants, but as we are experiencing now, those are not sustainable and can go away in a flash. I had a client of mine just 2 days ago informed me because of a bill that passed at the congressional level, the $200,000 that she was expecting in federal funding that was going to arrive on April 1st is now gone. And so those are things that you cannot control. This you can. Okay. It is the most effective way to raise dollars. It's also inexpensive. I've raised more money over lunch and coffee than I have doing a golf tournament, a gala, or writing grants. That simple. It's sustainable. Individuals, if you do the right thing, will continue to give and give in ways that your organization can count on. Again, if you do the right things, right? It is sustainable. The ratio of success is usually 2 to 1, right? For every two people that have the capacity to give $1,000, you're going to ask both of them. I guarantee you, at least one of them is going to give, right? That is the best ratio that you can find in the fundraising space. You do direct mail, if you get a 1 to 3% return on direct mail, that's average. That's good for direct mail, right? Same thing probably holds true for online, you know, solicitations, either through email or through social media, right? The return is low. That's why you have to cast the net as broadly as possible. Relationship fundraising, it's not like that. There's also no limits to the amount that you can raise. right? There just aren't, because if you keep going, you'll get more and more resources that will benefit the people that you serve. Okay. So I'm going to talk about the 6 rights of relationship fundraising. This is actually paraphrased from a book that I read called The Complete Guide to Fundraising Management by Stanley Weinstein. And he describes successful fundraising this way, and I call them the 6 rights of relationship fundraising. It's the right person asking the right prospect for the right amount to support the right project at the right time and in the right way. Okay. Now, I know that's a lot to sort of take in. When you think about it, we actually do this sort of vetting innately with other things in our lives, mostly on the personal side. But we vet, we make sure that things are just right before we move forward. Now, I'm just applying that same principle to relationship fundraising. Okay. So before you ask for a gift, here are the things that you need to know and you need to be, need to know, and then you need to do. First, you have to confirm who the right prospect is. So you need to take a look at your donor database. And what you're doing is you're trying to identify individuals that meet these 3 criteria. They're a link to your organization, so that means they are a board member, an alum, a donor. It's also a link, user, parent, anybody, any kind of link to your organization. That's the first criteria. Second, interest. They have to be interested in your mission. What about your mission are they interested in? How strong is that? That is something that you will develop as you begin to build that relationship. So of these 3 things, I'm about to reveal the third one. The interest part is probably the one that will be the weakest, but your job will be to develop that interest so that you have a clear understanding of what they like about your organization and what you're doing. The third is ability. Can they make a major gift to your organization? Now, I'm going to pause here for a second, because what's a major gift to your organization? That's the thing that you have to keep in mind. Now, if you don't have a clearly defined number that you say is a major gift, I would say to you, make that decision today, right? If it's something that you have to run past your board, or at least let your board know that a gift of $1,000 or more, so I'm just using that as an example, although I always recommend, if you don't have a starting point, that $1,000 can be your starting point. A lot of organizations will start a lot higher. Higher ed institutions, for example, a major gift is 10,000 and up, right? Some are 25,000 and up, right? But you need to define how you define what a major gift is, so that you're clear on it, because that is important. Because when you're looking at this criteria, you find link, interest, and ability, and if you think a major gift is $100, well, then it's going to take you a very, very long time for you to secure the gifts that you need through relationship fundraising, if you're only making $100 and $500 ask and so on, right? $1,000 is a really good place to start. If you want to go to 2,500, do that. My advice to you, though, start low and work your way up. Don't start high and work your way down. So if you say, I'm going to go say 5,000 is a major gift, and you look at your database and you see that you don't have that many folks that have the capacity to give at that level, and then you lower it, you don't want to be in that position, because now what the message you're sending is that you're now willing to lower your standard as it relates to major gifts. So start low, work your way up. You can always raise it. I don't recommend lowering it. Okay. Next, after you confirm all this, now it's time for you to connect, right? And so you want to make sure, this is where the other rights come into play. The right person. Is it you? Right? Are you the right person to work with this particular prospect? Is it a peer? Is it a board member? That's something you want to connect and decide on. You may hand off that relationship to someone else, or you may stay involved and bring someone else in who may ultimately be the person who asks. Okay? But you want to know who that right person is. What's the right purpose or project, right, that they want to support? That's something that you're going to learn as you connect with them. What's important to them? This is where that interest comes in, so that you have an understanding of what they're interested about in terms of what you do, so that when you make the ask, you're asking for the right reason. Now, some of you may say, well, we need unrestricted dollars to the bottom line. Great. Then that's the project, that's the purpose that you're asking for. But there may be something of interest that you do that is part of your daily operating budget that you could focus on when you're talking to that donor. So now you're asking in the context of what's important to them, what are they most interested in, and then you're on the right track. What's the right amount? Okay, so some of this comes from, and this may come up later in the presentation. Some of this comes from doing what I call wealth screening, and so wealth screening will help you determine the capacity of each individual in your database if you have the appropriate information, which is just name and address. That's all you need. And by the way, if anybody is concerned that wealth screening is a sort of a uncomfortable tool to use because it is revealing information about that person that that you think they don't know that you know, they're getting, first of all, when you do wealth screening, all of that is coming from public sources. They're not getting into a person's bank account or anything like that. They're able to paint a picture based on what they know about information connected publicly to their name and address. Okay, so that's how we determine and what their capacity is. So you want to figure out what the right amount is in terms of what you want to ask for, and then the right time. When will you make that ask? I'll talk about that a little bit later, and the right way, right? How are you going to make that ask, right? Really, really key things that you want to be thinking about as you lean into this. All right. So, a couple of things that you want to keep in mind when it comes to building these relationships, right? And then ultimately asking. I want you to picture your donors and yourself in this way. Your donors are in the driver's seat, right? They need to feel as though they are in control, right? You're not trying to manipulate them, you're not trying to control them. You're bringing them along on a journey to learn about your organization and what you do. And you want to make sure they feel like they're in control. You, as the nonprofit leader, you, as the person who's managing this relationship, you need to see yourself as the GPS. Your focus is to stay focused on the destination, and that is the gift or the ask itself. So if you have a plan that you've laid out, I'm going to bring this person to the organization, I'm going to give them a tour, then next time I'm going to take them to lunch, next time, right? You lay the plan out. Well, your donor, while you've got this all laid out on your GPS, right? Your donor may make a left turn. Well, you do what a GPS does and you recalibrate and stay focused on the destination, right? Go along with them. That may make the journey a little bit longer, but at the end of the day, you're meeting them at the point of their readiness and willingness to lean in and be ready for that ask. Okay. So now the next question is, when's the right time to make that ask? Okay? It's going to sound very simple, but here is the right time because it's nuanced. It's very different for every individual. I could sit here and tell you after 3 visits, you're ready. After 5 visits, you're ready. Not the case. Everybody's different. And so how do you know when it's the right time to ask for that gift? It's when that donor has no more questions for you and you have nothing more to share with them about your organization or about what you're asking for. Right? Again, very nuanced. It will be very different with every individual that you're dealing with. Okay? So now let's talk about making the ask itself. And so I want my role play person to get ready. Right? I will call upon you momentarily, but I want you to get into that mindset. We've talked about mindset early on. Get into that mindset of somebody who has all the money in the world. I want you to stay in that mindset when I call on you. Okay. Making the ask. When you make the ask, a couple things. Need to be specific. Got to state exactly the amount that you want. Not a range, not a giving chart. the amount that you want. Right? So many organizations I see will have like a chart with giving levels, and they'll slide that giving level chart in front of the donor at the table and say, "Where do you see yourself on this chart?" See it all the time. That was an old school thing that was done, particularly back in the 80s and 90s. Not an effective way to make an ask. Okay, you got to ask for what you want. Be specific. Got to be clear. Say exactly what you want to ask, and leave no room for interpretation at all. And then finally, you want it to be well scripted, not necessarily verbatim, right? You don't need to write it out and read it to them, so to speak, or memorize it. But you want to be clear. You want to be able to rehearse it, practice it with someone, because I know that this is a nerve wracking thing, right? Asking somebody for a 5-figure or 6-figure gift, right? So you want to be able to hear yourself saying it out loud so that it can comfortably flow from your lips, so that when you're ready to do it, you've been there before. Okay? All right. Now we're going to take this for a test drive. So I'm going to ask a volunteer to, let's see, Mark, are you willing to step up and be a volunteer?
I am.
Awesome. Awesome. So Mark, I'm going to set the stage for us here. Okay. It's really important that you know, sort of hear the instructions as well as staying in that mindset of being the wealthiest person on the planet. So you and I, we're going to pretend that I'm ultimately going to ask you for a gift. I want you to pretend that we have already met several times. Okay. Let's say I work for an organization that is a nonprofit daycare. Okay. Serving kids ages ages two, well, let's say from 6 months to 4 years old. Okay. Um, and we've been talking about it. I've given you a tour. You know, you've been fairly impressed with what you see, and I'm about to, after you've asked all the questions that you wanted to ask during the tour, during our visits, and now it's time for us to meet, and I'm ultimately going to ask you, for a gift. Okay, so that sets it up for us. All right. So, Mark, let's pretend that you and I are meeting at your office, your office that is probably the top of a high rise. We'll just position you as you should be, and I'm coming in to meet with you to have this conversation. Okay. All right. Hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm great. Yourself? How are you?
I am well. I want to thank you again. Still a good time for us to chat.
Oh, sure. I can.
Excellent.
I always make time. Always make time for you.
Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Well. Thank you, and I'll. I just want to say at the top, you've been very generous with your time. I want to thank you for the 4 or 5 times that we have met. You've come over to the center. You've toured the facility. You've asked very thoughtful questions. I truly appreciate that. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad that we've been able to create a great relationship between each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Mark, as you know, as we've been talking, we are an organization that sort of survives not only on the fees that we get from the families, but the fees that we get from the families are subsidized heavily by philanthropy. And as you know, we have a goal this year to support our bottom line. We need to raise $750,000, to support the bottom line. And Mark, what I would like to know from you is if you would be willing to make a contribution of $50,000 to support our annual budget.
I'd actually. I'll even tell you I'll triple that.
Ah, wow, wow, that's amazing. So $150,000.
Sure. Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. Mark, thank you so much for this. This gift is extraordinarily generous. It's more than we thought you would be willing to do at this time, and it goes without saying that it will go a very long way in helping us meet our goal. Because of your gift, we are only a few $1,000s away from hitting our goal, and we're 6 months ahead of schedule. So, Mark, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Both of
Awesome.
us, I think, love to make impacts in this world, even in different ways, and that's what sort of keeps us connected with each other.
Awesome. Awesome. Let me ask you this question, Mark. How would you like to go about taking care of this gift? You can write a check, or tell me a little bit about what you're thinking.
I'll get with our administrative staff, and we'll even actually get it like what we might call like an invoice or so from you guys, and so we can have proper backup on our end, and we'll get that check made out in the next week, and we'll be in the mail to you.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. What I'll do is I'll put together a pledge document, sort of outlining what we've discussed, and I'll email it over for you to look at. How about we reconnect? I can come back here. I could save you the stamp. Come back to your office next week, and after you reviewed it, we can get together. You can sign the document, and I could pick up the check then. How does that sound?
That seems to work. I'll put it on my calendar.
Awesome. Awesome. Very good. Well, Mark, I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for your generosity, your time. I truly, truly appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. I thank you for what you guys are doing for the community, because
Awesome.
once we raise these children up, then actually they can come work for our company.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right. And scene. Okay, Mark, thank you very much. I I truly appreciate that. Mark, let me ask you a couple questions now. It's just us. We're back to our regular selves here. What are some observations that you picked up during that exchange?
Well, that I think, well, number one is like each of us providing different things, maybe that the other person may not have expected. And some of it, like you said, would come on both parts. Like you've already mentioned, preparation on the nonprofit's part.
Mm.
Uh, but if, as the donor, the person being asked, if you've already done some preparing yourself, right? You've already, even as an individual or a company or something, that uh, you're already like you're doing your pre-planning as the organization is doing pre-planning, and somewhat is if when you do that, you are waiting for the nonprofit to finally come to you,
Mm-hmm.
but you're already prepared yourself. So yeah, the preparation on both sides,
Yeah.
I think makes things work even faster, and to be able to provide each of us, like providing answers almost to a comment each of us may have made, right? That each of us was, even if we didn't prepare that one thing, we were somewhat ready to respond in a way either to make your life easier from me, or my life easier from you, in a sense. And so that's where, as individuals, to whether you're alone on your own, or with a spouse, or as a family, or as a business or something like that, to be able to do more planning, do more communication each side, because we're always talking about the nonprofits part. But it's really that if the people, like you mentioned earlier with that couple, is
Mm-hmm.
that they were already thinking and planning about stuff, maybe not exactly knowing what they were going to do, and but they must have had, as a couple, at least some conversations. And that, I think, is what makes
Yeah.
really these transactions just, you say successful, but just in a way that it works for both
Yeah.
parties.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate your participation in that. Very, very helpful. A couple things I want to cover as we, recap this as well. So after the ask itself, and some of this is kind of what I modeled during the role play, is you got to be prepared for what happens afterwards. So here's what they may say. Right? You may get a yes, which in this case, Mark said yes, and Mark did something that most donors won't do, and that was triple. Right? The offer. That can happen. That can happen. which means you don't need to be afraid of how much you ask for, because in all the years that I've been doing this, nobody's ever been upset with me. I've never had a shoe thrown at me. I've never been thrown out of anybody's office. None of those things have happened, right? The worst that's happened if I've asked for more than they can give is, oh, I'm flattered that you think I could do that much. That's it. That's the extent of it. So, but be prepared. If you get a yes, keep your composure, thank them, close the deal, right? That's kind of what I did with Mark. Okay. The other thing Mark could have said was, I can't do that, but I can do this. So he could have said, well, I can't do 50, but we can do, or I could do 25. Great. You accept it because we're not buying cars here, right? This is not counter for counter. Accept it, right? And then thank them and then move toward closing the deal. This becomes your baseline, by the way. If this is your first ask with this donor and you ask and they come in a little bit lower, well, they've just given you your baseline. That means that now you know where you're starting from. The next time you ask, you may ask for a little bit more, but now they've given you your baseline. The third response could be, I need time to think about it or confer with their spouse, right? And so thank them for that consideration. But then, real key here is establishing that next meeting. Don't let them go away, say, I need a week. Let's talk in a week, because this is where you can lose complete control of the process, right? You want to make sure that you ask them for that meeting, get it on their calendar while you're together. Something we don't often think about, right? We run out of a coffee shop. Oh, well, I'll call you in a week. No, you're both sitting there literally with your devices that have your calendars on them. Open up, say, look, if you ask them, when would be a good time to follow up, which I call the magic
And
question, which
just
you're going to see
as
in a
I
few.
mentioned, as the donor is to, which I didn't do, but it, like you said, what typically what you just mentioned on your end is the same thing as I should be thinking, waiting for this to happen. And then you go, what are our next steps?
Mm-hmm.
I almost could have said, let's set up a meeting for same time next Thursday, you know, come back
Right.
to my office. If you can come back
Yep.
to my office, great. If not, let's schedule another time
Yep.
and let's finalize this. So
Yep.
as the donor, you should be prepared to almost offer that as well. But if if you don't, like you did, on your end to offer that
Exactly.
next meeting.
Exactly. And as nonprofit leaders, we have to be the ones who drive the process, because most donors won't do what Mark just described. Most will, they'll just think, oh, they'll leave it loose. You don't want it to leave it loose. And here's why: your time as a nonprofit leader is precious, your donor's time is precious. And so rather leaving the meeting and saying, oh, yeah, we'll connect in a couple of weeks, just ask them, when would be a good time to follow up? Oh, I need about a week. Now you open up your phone, you look a week from now, and you say, well, I'm looking at a week from now. Why don't I meet you at your office 2 o'clock, next week? Oh, yeah, that's fine. Then you even say, can I, if you don't mind, do you mind if I send it to you so it's on your calendar? Great. Now it's done. Now it's done. You've booked the next meeting. Probably one of the biggest challenges that organizations face when they're in this space. So there are these three responses. What's missing from these responses if there's an ask? So we got yes, can't do that, but I can do this. Need time to think about it. What's missing?
The no.
Exactly. Exactly. Because if you do this right, and I kid you not, you do this right, you're not going to get a no. You're probably going to get a counter. That's the worst, is that you offered something less than what you asked for. Because if they're along with you on this journey, they know it's coming. Sometimes along the journey, they may ask you, hey, are you going to ask me for money? Right? And even before you're ready, here's your response to that. At some point, I'd love to talk with you about ways that you can support the organization, but not today. That's it. Right? And if they continue to meet with you, then you know you're going to get a gift, because they know it's coming. Okay? And then again, the magic question, which I talked about: when would be a good time to follow up? Always, always ask that, so that you stay in control of the process and you're not sitting by the phone waiting for it to ring, or sitting by your email, right? It's already set in stone. Okay. After you get the yes, here's what you need to do. Your job now is to keep the donor engaged. Now, what I did with Mark is I also nailed down date, time to close the deal, right? And that's done, because that's the other thing. You can get a yes, and you can be in your office celebrating, but if you don't have the check in the door or the pledge form signed, you cannot book that gift in your system, right? So really important to do that. But once after the yes, you want to acknowledge the gift, and yes, gift that size, you're going to send a thank you letter. Yes, a letter in the mail, not an email, right? A letter, right?
And actually, I was just thinking after you said you'd get me one, in a way, is that as a nonprofit, actually, you almost would have, whether you have a portfolio or a briefcase or something with you, and just after it's whatever it is, whether they give you this what you ask or less or more, that you've got that little
Yeah,
brochure right there with the one page is a ripped out
yeah,
thing, and go, oh, I've got it, I've got this right here. Here you go. Like,
yeah,
if you could fill this out for me, like right now, and sign it, I
yep,
can take it back, and that'll officially get the process going.
yep,
And
yeah.
that way, the person has committed right then and there.
Exactly. Exactly. I like to use a full page pledge form for
Right.
gifts that size. And yeah,
Right.
I used to carry those with me, and I would fill them out, and I would just turn it around and say, if you can sign it right here, we're good to go. And I could take it back to the office and book the
Right.
gift. The dates are set, especially if they pledge over a period of time. The
Right.
dates for the pledge reminders are set. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, you're also now planning engagement. So now, like, I'm not going to just forget about Mark, right? I'm going to stay connected to Mark. Mark just gave us $150,000. So I'm going to continue to visit with him. I'm going to continue to invite him to the center. I'm going to send him emails, maybe with photos of a new playground that we built for the kids because of the money that he gave. I'm going to, always convey the return on his investment periodically through phone calls, occasional coffees, inviting him back, staying connected with him. The worst thing you can do is get that gift and then not show up again until a year from now. You have taken something very, very relational and made it transactional when you do that. Okay. So, also, the other thing is you want to leverage relationships. So, I may be asking Mark, who else should I be talking to? Who do you know that would be interested in knowing about who we are? Right. And I'm not only going to ask for Mark to give me names, if he has one or two names to give me, I'm going to ask Mark if he's willing to make the introduction. And that could be simply through email, right? Call them or email them, get their permission to make the introduction. He makes the introduction, I take it from there, right? This is how we grow our major donor database, right? Through this organic growth. And then I'm teeing up for the next ask, right? So when I meet with Mark a year from now, we've stayed connected through that whole time. He's given $150,000 this year. I may ask him if he'd be willing to do the same thing again, or maybe even a little bit more, right? And he's going to feel inclined to do that because I've gotten him closer and closer to the organization, right? Okay, that is the end of our presentation. It is exactly 3 o'clock. Um, this is a time where I usually take questions. The QR code on the screen, there's two of them. If you want to book a coaching session with me, just scan that QR code. You can book a session that way. You can also subscribe to my video podcast, which is also an audio podcast. The website is www.thefundcoach.com. You can go to the website, upper right hand corner. You can book a free coaching session. And also, if you scroll down a little bit, you can subscribe to the video podcast there. Okay. Fundraising. I say this all the time. It's not about the dollars that you raise at all. It's about what the dollars do for the people that you serve. Okay? And I want to thank you for your time today. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them.